Hello, everyone. Uh, the, the title of my paper is Catholic Ephemeral Culture, Personal Memory, and Print Media Archiving Vernacular Holy Cards in Mid 20th Century, Southwest India. My name is Prabha Sakarias. I am an assistant professor at the Department of Languages, Christ University, Delhi, NCR. Books, magazines, newspapers, and other printed artifacts emerged as sources of entertainment as well as mediums of knowledge transmission in the mid 20th century Travancore. All these forms of knowledge transmissions were permeated with and produced by the existing social relationships. Like any other cultural artifact, the printed texts are also social products that reflected, appropriated, or transformed the social relationships. 20th century being a battleground of conflicting ideas in the Malayalam public sphere, different communities tried to establish their print presence and contribute to the knowledge production of the period from their standpoints. This paper wishes to specifically look at the cultural practice of preserving ephemeral holy cards as part of the domestic religious life of the Catholic laity from the region and the many meanings these material objects had in the religious lives of the people who preserved them. Stuffed into a prayer book that belonged to my paternal great grandmother, I came across the stunning visual archive in print, offering a fascinating window into the practice of visual piety in a domestic realm, all the while engaging with the medium of print and involuntarily preserving a personal archive of ephemeral paper cards. The word ephemera in the dictionary suggests as something short lived and transitory. However, in this case, as it is in the case of many other families from the Catholic community in Kerala, this visual archive documenting the religious lives of the lay people are surviving the test of time. This paper is interested in presenting the case of one family's personal archive to understand how a community conversed with print as a medium while engaging in an everyday spiritual life. According to the HarperCollins Encyclopedia of Catholicism, holy cards refer to small printed cards containing pious sentiments or depicting popular religious figures. After the community had its initiation towards an engagement with print, these cards are used to commemorate religious events, pray for a particular saint, or to remember the dead. The subject matter for these holy cards are diverse, but tend towards the sentimental. To discuss the presence of ephemeral holy cards in the domestic religious lives of the Catholics of Kerala, it is important to introduce the Catholic engagement with print in the 19th to 20th centuries. Foreseeing the spiritual, intellectual, and cultural advantages and the progress that the press and publication would bring to the Catholic community of the region, Kuriakose Elias Chavara established a printing press named St. Joseph's Press in Mananam, Kottayam in central Travancore. As Marshall McLuhan might elaborate, print altered our culture and even changed the way human beings think when they adapted from an oral culture to the linearity and regularity of print. The reading or engaging with written text or of any kind needs to be understood by keeping in mind a multiplicity of cultural programs at play during the period. Local cultures and histories add to this multiplicity that Eisenstadt terms as regional cultural resources. Holy cards will fit into the context of a visual turn of the society. The study on visual history in the context of photographs by Sujit Parel is important in this context. Parel argues that the study on visual history involves both the visual mediation of the social as well as the social mediation of the visual, specifically the cultural and social appropriation of the photographic representational technology to supplement the existing interpretation of the real. He argues that such an interpretation was enhanced with the production of a new visual semiologies evolved out from the intermediary domains of modernity, technology, and culture. The paper wishes to point out that it is significant to understand the artifact of a holy card as an object of symbolic religious significance and to study the practice of preserving the holy cards as a process of creating an archive of personal familial memory. The act of preserving these ephemeral objects also invariably becomes an act of preserving the community history and family history. Often found preserved inside the prayer books or Bibles personally used by people and handed down to future generations as heirlooms of material culture as they experienced. These printed pieces of paper tell the story of a daily engagement with the print media. For instance, the holy cards this study would use in this paper were found in a family prayer book called the Nityaradhana Pustakam, produced in the late 19th century from the St. Joseph's Press and was preserved for 4 generations. In the Nityaradhana, as seen in the picture, or the book of daily prayers for perpetual adoration, was a staple book in every Catholic family, enabling its members with their spiritual and religious life. The Nityaradhana Pustakam, often considered as an essential part of the wedding trousseau of Catholic girls ever since its publication in 1885, in this case became a blueprint for the religious life of a young woman from the late 19th century. In the pages of the book, we could find these ephemeral holy cards marking significant life events such as deaths of loved ones, first holy communions of children or grandchildren, or memorials of sending a son or a daughter off to a religious life. As the book gets handed down the generations, one might find more family members and their spiritual rites of passages. Some of these cards were locally printed and produced in Travancore in the black and white print format available at the period, while some others were imported lithograph prints from places such as Italy or Germany with colorful pictorial depictions of devotional scenes on one side and a printed text in the vernacular language of Malayalam, locally printed on the other side. To study the practice of preserving and archiving holy cards in Catholic religious culture, this paper is divided into 3 key parts. The first part will discuss the holy card as an artifact used to preserve the memory of the dearly departed in the family. This section will also discuss the narrative act of choosing the text that will go along with the holy card and the variations found based on the vocation and life experiences of the individuals. Artifacts for remembering the dead. The practice of memorializing the dead is a specifically Catholic practice due to the Catholic Church's belief in the ability of the living to help the dead from purgatory to an eternal life in heaven through prayers. The choice of words to go with the holy cards is often a reflective activity from the part of the living. It is suggestive of a choice the living makes on behalf of the dead in making a brief narrative choice to find an apt verse that represents the life of the dead person. The status and life history of the individual in whose memory the card is being created is reflected in this tiny printed artifacts. For example, here we are looking at the memorial card for a woman who had raised over 10 children, led a typically blessed life according to the standards of the community, and towards the end of her life endured an illness that led to a life of suffering and pain. Her life's journey is memorialized in the verses her family members had selected to go with her memorial holy card. The text reads like this. വേദന തിങ്ങിയ ജീവിതയാനം പെട്ടെന്നങ്ങ് നിലച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞു. കർത്താവേ നിൻ കൽപ്പനയാലെ അന്തിമയാത്ര പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞു. വിധി ദിവസം നിൻ വിളി കേൾക്കുമ്പോൾ സന്നിധി അണയാൻ വരമരുളേണം. This is roughly translated as, my life, ship filled with pain, has stopped its travel suddenly. O Lord, on your command, I have told my final farewell. Bless me to reach you when you finally call unto me on the judgment day. One can observe that if the deceased is a member of the clergy, the text that accompanies the card and the image that gets selected is slightly different from that of the laity. For the members of the clergy, there are references to their vocation of priesthood reflected in the card made to memorialize them. To take the example seen here, we can see a depiction of the agony in the Garden of Gethsemane, an event in the life of Jesus where Christ is believed to have felt the overwhelming feeling of sadness and anguish. This episode symbolizes the call towards the vocation and the life of ritual piety lived by the priest. We can see that the verses that accompany the picture are roughly translated as follows. Brothers, we have worshipped together and conducted the Holy Mass. When you deliver another Holy Mass each day, kindly remember me too. Show your divine mercy to the one who has devoted his entire life to protect your sacred home and to add beauty to it. The short poem that accompanies the deceased member of the clergy is documenting his priestly life of prayer and meditation through the juxtaposition of the image of the agony of Christ and these short verses. Now, the next card, this one brings back memories of the time when the researcher lost her father's sister, who was a favorite aunt of hers. Sister Therese, or Tangamma, as she was fondly known in the family, was a favorite of everyone. She was the closest sibling to my father, closer in age and closer in bond among all the siblings. Her death was one of the most painful memories for the entire household, and I remember the scene from my childhood where my father came back from the printers and talked about the various choices laid in front of him. In many ways, it was my father's narratological decision to juxtapose the following verse next to the picture of his dear departed sister. I was dear to all of you, but the one who loves me more than all of you invited me into an eternal life. I am leaving. I will be present now in your prayers and your memories alone. Choosing matching verses for a dearly departed is perhaps one of the toughest editorial choices one has to make in their ordinary daily lives. The prevalent idea of the beloved family member leaving to another eternal life is the comforting sentiment that allows them to internalize their grief. Parayal's argument about visual text that does, in quotes, not only having a strong indexical connection with contextual histories and everyday life of the people, but also open up a myriad realm of affective and emotional histories, is significant here in this context. Now, the second section of this paper will look at a variant of memorial holy cards that are used to mark the sacramental rites of passage in the lives of a Catholic individual. This card from 1944 displays the details of the priestly ordination and the ceremonial first mass of a young priest. The picture shows the image of a crucified Christ, and under the image, one can find the words De Nobili Press Madura. De Nobili Press is a Catholic printing press in Madurai, Tamil Nadu, and it suggests that the Catholic print cultural trade connections the region of Kerala shared with the region of Tamil Nadu. The trade of lithographic holy cards produced in the European locations such as Italy and Germany were also a popular practice of the period. Cards imported from such locations were then locally printed with vernacular text according to the need. The images in the cards were also significant as it represents imaginative scenes of divine blessings at the time of the sacrament. For example, um, here we can see the memorial holy card imported from West Germany, but on the other side, we can see the details of a perpetual vow ceremony of a Catholic nun typed in Malayalam. The image on the card is a representation of Christ's divine blessing to the young woman who is committing herself to a religious life as a nun. The images blended into a collage on the card also holds a lot of symbolic significance as it represents the vow of prayer and celibacy that the woman is committing to. The images of a rosary and a holy book are symbolic representations of the life of prayer and devotion. The image of the thorns symbolizes the vow of poverty she is embracing, that of renouncing material pleasures in life. The image of the lily flower represents purity, chastity, and virginity in Catholic symbolism. Another significant Holy Sacrament card produced popularly is that representing the memory of the first Holy Communion of Catholic children. This figure shows a memorial holy card printed in Italy and has a vernacular Malayalam text to remember a child's first Holy Communion, and this is from 1964. The third section of this paper is a quick look at the evolution of the holy cards over the years in parallel to the evolution of the printing technology in the region. One can observe that even though the technology is moving through the transformations from printing presses to the digital photograph productions, the sentiment behind the creation of holy cards are still alive and is an integral part of the domestic religious culture. These simple cards display the photographs of a wife and a husband. Um, the wife who passed away in 1962 and the husband who passed away in 1970. They are both made in a similar style and are found to be matching in even the verses that go along with them, which says, "Kind Jesus, provide eternal peace for this person." Now, moving on to the next card here, the presence of this particular memorial holy card shown here in the family prayer book also symbolizes how there are new marriages and new family members included in the list of relatives. This holy card preserves the memory of my maternal grandfather, and it signifies that the personal prayer book in which all the earlier cards were kept is now under the care of my mother, who is a member of the third generation handling the book. Given the nature of the book, its fragile nature, its the revisions in prayer that happened over the years, this was not a prayer book used by my mother for her daily devotional purposes. She had her own book of favorite prayers with a new version of Malayalam. However, the idea of archiving the memorial holy cards inside the late 19th century prayer book preserved with much reverence was an already established tradition in the household, and my mother had no confusions as to where to store holy cards in the house. From an object of daily devotion, now the prayer book is transforming into a photo album of memories. The next holy cards are of a couple who passed away only 6 years apart. But these two images, I'm coming to the next image in the next slide. These two images show a rapid change in the technology used for the holy card production. The wife's memorial card seen here informs us that she passed away in 2004, and the popular form of production for the holy cards at the time were a laser printer in glossy paper produced in a printing press who does this kind of ephemeral production. However, by the time we reach 2010 and look at the husband's memorial card, we can observe that the location of print production has now shifted from a printing press to a photo studio. The photograph of the deceased is also printed in color and is produced like a photograph. To conclude, this paper was a preliminary attempt at the practice of visual piety in the holy cards among the Catholics of Kerala. However, there is a lot of scope to study the evolution of visual cultural practices of the community and the community's engagements with print. It will be worthwhile to study the circulatory patterns of ephemeral and other printed material within the community to understand the dissemination of print beyond the often studied categories of books and newspapers. Thank you.